Welcome to Seed to Success, the podcast where we deep dive into the strategies, stories, and smart decisions that help VAs and OBMs grow and thrive. I'm your host, Adrienne Donnelly, and whether you're just starting out or looking for ways to take your business to the next level, you're in the right place. This episode is proudly sponsored by Ready to Boss Legal. Their online legal templates focus on the ins and outs of protecting your business legally without fuss or large legal fees, leaving you to focus on what you do best, being the boss and building the business of your dreams. As a listener of the podcast, you will receive 10% off any templates through Ready to Boss Legal. Just use SEED10 upon checkout. That is SEED10 for a 10% discount at readytobosslegal.com. Now let's get into today's conversation.
Welcome to Tahnée from the Strategy Studio. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Me too. We had you on recently for one of our Inner Circle masterclasses and the team are still talking about it. So I'm excited to share your message a bit wider with our community today. So if we want to start with the very basics, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do at the Strategy Studio?
Yeah, definitely. So I work with predominantly female-founded service-based businesses, and my expertise is really helping them communicate their value. So sometimes that's strategy sessions where I'm just helping them talk through what their offerings are and finding the right language to communicate about those offerings. And then other times that's copywriting. So I might be writing their website for them or helping them with email sequences that they're using or proposals that they write for clients. And then I've also pivoted to teaching service-based business owners how to use AI to help them with their marketing, because I find a lot of my clients are solopreneurs or small teams, and it's just that case of wearing all the hats, and anytime we can find a tool to help be one of those hats for us, in my opinion, is a huge win. So I do a lot of training with ChatGPT to do marketing materials for businesses.
Amazing. And that was specifically the masterclass you ran for our members, which really blew a lot of our minds. And we've spoken a lot about that. You mentioned just then in your introduction, the word language, and that's something that we speak about a lot in the industry. It's something I'm very passionate about in terms of the importance of language, and we're speaking about our businesses to potential clients. Why is that something that you think is important, especially for female founders to really focus on?
I think because we are so used to learning what we think about brands through that first impression, the visual appearance. So when we think about bigger businesses, we are generally thinking about the look and feel we get from that first impression of a brand interaction. But when we're a service-based business, yes, that absolutely matters. But what gets people over the line is the language we use to talk about what it is we do. Now, the difference with a product-based business is usually people get to see the tangible they're receiving before they've really even had to part with money. When we're a service-based business, people don't really appreciate the value of what we do until they've had the experience, until they've paid us the money. So we have to think, what can we do to help people understand the value of what we do before they've paid the money, to help justify that to them, even if it's subconsciously just a little bit more. And I believe it's language and getting our messaging right that enables us to do that. And that's what enables us to pivot our business to speak to a higher value client. It's what enables us to charge more for our services. Without the right language, I think it's much harder to do those things.
I think when a lot of VAs and OBMs, online business managers, are starting out, and I was there myself 10 years ago, we say yes to every client opportunity that comes across our desk because we're so not desperately trying to make it work, but we are so invested in making our business work that often we say yes to everyone because we're trying to build those businesses. How do you think our messaging and our language plays into that, especially if we're just starting out and there is that temptation to say yes to every client who is interested in working with us?
Yeah, and I can hand on my heart say that was me too when I started my business 6+ years ago. And there's nothing wrong with that. A big part of that is learning what work do you actually enjoy doing in the first place. Because I think when we first start out, we have this idea of what we think we want our business to be, but it's not until we start experiencing it and we see what people will pay for it and all those little granular things that happen within a business that you go, oh, okay, this service I don't really enjoy, so let me pivot that. So there's nothing wrong with all of those things. I do think, though, when we start to get more clear on what it is we want to do, that I can do everything for everyone language lessens the price point that people expect to pay. So we all know that we pay more for a specialist doctor than a general practitioner, right? And I think you can take that same mentality to really any business. When someone specializes in something, we naturally think we will pay more for it. So when we can narrow the scope of what we do and present ourselves as excellent in these particular things, it could be you're still offering the same services, but the way you do them might be different. For example, you might offer them in an intensive format versus ad hoc situation, that you might only offer retainer versus call me when you need me. So it's just about thinking through how you can narrow your focus to not try and be all things to all people. There's nothing wrong with that in the start. I feel like that's a big part of experimentation in business. But the minute you want to start charging more and you want to pivot to a higher value client, and when I say higher value client, I generally mean that will pay more for your services. That's when I think we need to start niching down a little bit more.
Let's talk about that concept of a higher value client a little bit more. What does that mean to you, and how do you, again, see the work that you do in messaging and language and copy play into the success of attracting those higher level? Now, acknowledging you mentioned higher level by your definition means a financial value, but I think also the higher value can also be the higher value that we're adding to their business. And you mentioned that kind of ad hoc, call me when you need me type work versus being a real partner in their business.
Yeah. So what I think it's worth paying attention to is the clients that you really want to work with that are your high value clients. So the way I first did this exercise was I looked at, I took money out of it. I wrote down the names of the favorite 12 clients that I'd worked with in the previous 12 months. And out of interest, I then went into Xero, and I can say I'm not a great numbers person, but I went into my Xero and I pulled the spend that each of those clients had had with me. How much revenue had they contributed to my business in the last 12 months? And really interestingly, I discovered that roughly 30% of my clients were bringing in 70% of my income. So when I did that exercise, I went, okay, well, interestingly, those 10 favorite clients were in that group of the 30% of clients. So I looked at what are the commonalities within these clients. And then I looked at, why do I love working with them? What is it about them? Is it about the service I offer? Is it about my relationship with them? Is it that they treat me like a partner versus a service provider? Like, what is it that makes me love working with those people? So I think that was a part of it. But then also I started looking at, okay, if I want more of those clients, what do I need to do differently? Why does my language matter? Why do I need to talk differently? And what was really clear to me was those favorite clients. So for me, my high value clients, they didn't care for the intricacies of what I did. They cared for the transformation that I made. And what I mean by that is when I could talk to them about what would be different in their business when I brought in my expertise, that's the part they cared about. They didn't want to know about the 50 steps I did in the middle. They wanted to know that I understood their problem, that I would take care of everything in the middle, and that they would get the outcome that was the pain point they were struggling with. And just on pain points, that's another thing. You will discover those pain points will evolve as your clients evolve. So the pain points that your initial clients in business might have, if you just stay aware of those and keep a little running note of them, and as you start to find more of the clients you do love working with, what are they struggling with? Write those down. Is there an overlap? And a lot of the times there will be, but you'll start to realize that there's more specific pain points that you probably are really uniquely positioned to solve. It's why you love working with that client and someone else might not. But those are your points of difference. Your ability to solve those pain points is what will make someone want to work with you. But it's not enough to call out the pain point. You need to call out the transformation that you make for them. I call it the imagine if vision. Imagine what would it be like if you'd fix that problem for them? If you'd solve that bottleneck in their business by taking some of the tasks off their to-do list. Let them imagine what it could be like, because that's truly what you're selling, and that's what language helps us do.
In our industry, we talk a lot about, there's a big conversation, and you mentioned it before with the specialist versus the generalist kind of doctor around the importance of niching. And some people will say, you have to niche. There's no other way. You won't be successful otherwise. And I think sometimes our definition of niche in our industry is it needs to be, you have to niche in an industry, you have to niche in a business size, you have to niche in a certain tech platform or something within the tech stack. But I think there's also something to be said for the softer skills side of niching. If I look back at the clients that I've had over the years, then they're from florists to business coaches to accountants to HR consultants to psychologists. There's nothing really the same when you look at them from the outside, but what the through line is they see me as a real partner. They fully trust what you're doing. They empower you to do the role and they see the value. And I think that is almost a niche in itself. So I know when I'm talking to that is the person in my head that I'm talking to that actually understands the value. And you mentioned there about talking to their pain points. And their pain points, you're right, they do evolve. What it is the start is often just overwhelmed. They're just, something's not working. Their inbox is stressing them out. Something, can be really basic like that. But then their pain points evolve as you evolve with them. And I guess then your language then needs to evolve with your business as well.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with your thoughts on niching because I'm the same. I guess you could say service-based businesses is a niche, but it's not. There's product and service-based are two big, broad categories. And yes, I work predominantly with females, but again, the industries that they come from is incredibly diverse. My version of niching in my business is the way I offer my services. So I tend to work in an intensive format. So if someone comes to me and they need help with refining their messaging to reposition to a new target audience, if they need to upgrade the services, repackage them, which means they then need to recommunicate all of that into their pitch decks and their website. And I do all of that in a 1-week service offering. So that for me is my version of niching down. It's how I do what I do that's my niche versus who I serve. So I think niching, exactly as you said, can be in any capacity. It's just your point of difference, I think, is probably a better way to think about it than necessarily niching. You just need to have something that makes you different to your competitors. But in saying that, I also don't really pay attention to my competitors because I believe that once you know that you do it your way, do you really have competitors? Because you're just you doing your thing. As long as you know how to talk about that really effectively, then that's your superpower.
That competition conversation could be like a whole other podcast episode. Again, it's something we talk a lot about in our industry, and it's cliche in terms of, competition over collaboration or collaboration over competition, I should say. But I think, when you do start going, this is, I'm solid in what I have. This is what I have to offer. Some people are going to love it. Some people it's not going to be for them. And that's fine because there's plenty of people in our industry and there will be someone for them. Not every client will be for us and vice versa. I think, as I said, that's a whole other episode in itself. If a VA or an OBM is listening and they're thinking, my messaging, I don't believe is attracting the right clients, the clients that are coming to me where it's not working, they're giving me red flags, we're getting started, but it's not sustainable. What's your advice around where they should start to really reposition themselves in terms of attracting who they think their ideal client is?
Yeah, so I would start with just that list of, before you even go to your messaging, get really clear on the qualities of the types of clients you do want to work with. So even if it's just pen and paper, but get really clear on who are those people, not necessarily their names, their businesses. You can get that granular if you like, but I'm more thinking about the feeling side of it. Like, what do they want your help with? How do they want you to make them feel when you provide your service to them? What are the services, to get a bit more specific, what are the services that they want you to perform? How much do they want their hand to be held in the process? The more clear you can get on that, once you have that really concrete, even if you're not 100% certain, but at the moment, that's what I want to start heading towards, then you can start to tweak your language. The biggest mistake people make is to think that in order to attract a different type of client or a higher value client or a bigger spending client, my business needs to look bigger. That's such a misconception. And so often when a client comes to me, they'll say, I was trying to reposition to appeal to more established business owners, but I'm younger in my business journey and it's just me. So I read in my website and I talked about us and our team and all of those things. But all that they've really ended up doing is making their messaging confusing, and they've diluted their superpower, which is them. So the first thing I'd say is a higher spending client doesn't necessarily mean you have to look like a bigger business. So don't jump straight to the messaging before you're clear on who it is you're trying to speak to. Because if you go back to that list, you'll probably realize those ideal clients you want to work with, they don't care. They don't care how many members of your team you have. They'd most likely want to work with you. That's why they're reaching out to you. So that's probably one of the first things I'd say. And then I'd start to get clear on, well, what's the transformation I deliver? And can you write that down? Again, don't even bother about your website yet. Can you just get clear in that on paper? And then just start trialing that language in social media posts, in conversations. Get really comfortable with using the language so it feels like you, and then you can start to update your website. Because what happens is if we update our website with language that doesn't feel like us, we get nervous, then we don't want to drive people to our website, and there's this snowball effect. It's like you put on this new uniform that doesn't feel comfortable and you don't feel like you live in. I like to start living in the language first when I go to a networking event or my ChatGPT services weren't on my website for an entire year while I was offering them. But that's because I still wasn't clear on how I wanted to talk about what I did. So I started having the conversations. I found the language that resonated with people. I listened to the pain points that people shared with me. And I started to accumulate all of that knowledge and the language people were using to talk about it. And then I went and updated my website messaging. So don't think you have to instantly jump to all of those outwards facing touch points. It's okay to trial it first, because if you're going to jump straight to your website, make sure you feel comfortable wearing it, living in it, so to speak. Otherwise, the imposter syndrome will slap us all in the face and we won't even want to share or talk about it. And that's obviously to the detriment of everything we've worked so hard for.
That's such a good point about, you mentioned the online messaging, but also our offline and in-person messaging. You and I live in the same area. We see each other often at networking events that are primarily for female business owners and professionals. And you're right, there is such a difference when you meet someone and you say, oh, what do you do? And their answer and how much they own that, or, you know, really say it with their chest kind of thing, like, or they kind of fumble over it. And I've been in both camps where I'm still trying to work it out, or I'm trialing out a little bit of a new elevator pitch, for want of a better word. But it's so true, because straight away when someone goes, oh, I do this, this, and this for these people, you go, oh, wow, I know if I need that, I'll go to that person. It's such a good point around that real ownership of our messaging. And that can be really hard if you're a little bit more introverted in those in-person settings, but also in the online space if you're not owning it yourself yet.
Yes. And there's something I'd love to add on that. I love frameworks. Anything that can help my brain understand something better, I'm a big fan of. And Daniel Priestley, who's the author of a book called Oversubscribed, he has this really great framework he shares about really your elevator pitch. So I write a lot of elevator pitches for clients in the work that I do, which is really that when someone says, so what do you do? Nice to meet you. What do you do? It's that answer that you give. And I find that I was great at writing that part. I used to be a journalist. Coming up with that line was okay, but I'm more of an introvert. And it was the conversations that followed that I started to become uncomfortable with. How do I continue this conversation? Once I've said the part I'm confident with, then what? And he has this framework, and it talks about the things that the brain remembers. And there's 5 things, and it's scary, sexy, strange, free, and familiar. Now, I would say, don't know about you, but scary and sexy are probably things that I'm not really going to lead with in any kind of networking situation. I don't think most people would.
I'm not sure we're your target audience for the second one. Maybe ask your husband.
Right. I'm just going to leave those 2 to the side. Strange is a funny one. I would usually say, again, you could maybe put that to the side. I can see why the brain remembers it, though. It's the reason we remember the bad news stories, right? For the scary part of it. It's the reason fear marketing if you like to use that. Personally, I don't, but it's why it works, because it's scary. But when we get to the strange piece, I would not have really have thought about this previously, but one thing I started doing to differentiate one of my own services was, I think that a lot of VAs and OBMs would relate to this, because so much of what we do is us and a computer. Like, it's not sexy.
It's not sexy. There goes that one.
Right? So, and I'm the same. If I'm writing a client's messaging strategy or a new website, it's me in a Google Doc. It doesn't look interesting. I was like, how can I make this look interesting? So whenever I was doing that particular service, I started attaching my microphone to random objects.
It's one of my favorite Instagram series.
And I don't even really know where it came from. It was just me being a bit silly, thinking, how can I make people want to pay attention to what I'm talking about? And I only do it when I'm offering this service. And I've done it for maybe 3 or 4 intensives now. And whenever I bring out my microphone attached to some random object, people are like, oh, this must be an intensive week. And people have openly told me that they watch just to see what I'm going to attach my microphone to, which sounds so odd, but it's that strange piece in what the brain remembers. And so many people have now, I'm not sure if this is a good thing, but have come to associate me with my microphone stands. So that's kind of the strange element. Is there something, it doesn't have to be too weird, strange, but something that can make it stick in their mind. The other two, free and familiar. So free is obviously when you give that kind of lead magnet, if you give them a checklist or the free download, those kind of things, or a discovery call, all of those are the free things. But the one that's most powerful that I think we can all lean into is the familiar. And the reason the familiar matters is because our brains need to be able to understand and file bits of information away. We get so many data points every day. How do we remember something? So all of the data tells us that in order for our brand to be familiar, there's this rule called the 7-11-4 rule, which is a little bit, can sound overwhelming, but it makes sense. So in order for your brain or a client's brain to remember you, in theory, they need to have consumed 7 hours of your content. I'll explain that in a second, have 11 interactions with your brand, and have interacted with you in 4 different contexts. Now, that's what the data tells us about how people remember things. So at first, when I read this and heard this, I went, in what world could there be 7 hours of content that someone has consumed? But it adds up incredibly quickly. If you think about how long you binge on Instagram or TikTok or whatever your social media platform of choice is, the amount of times you're scrolling on LinkedIn, you can go and listen to podcast episodes that someone's done. So Adrienne, you would very much have over 7 hours of content that people can consume or interact with that you had been a part of. And I quickly realized, oh yeah, that you could, if you really went looking. No one does this in one sitting, obviously, but that's the thought space. If someone set aside a day in their calendar, could they spend it binging my content? Because the research shows us that's in a roundabout way how much people need to hear and understand about our business and what we do in order to get it, so to speak. The 11 interactions with your brain and the 4 contexts and platforms, that's really just about where can they find more about you? Are they meeting you in person? Are they having conversations with you? Are you tagged in someone's LinkedIn posts? Are you offline as well as online? Are you on podcasts? But just when I heard that number, 7-11-4, the 7 hours of content felt overwhelming, and I kind of just put that to the side originally. But the 11 interactions and 4 contexts or platforms, I found that was really helpful because that made me think about, okay, if people need to interact with me in so many different contexts, am I giving the same message in all those contexts? Or if you jumped between LinkedIn and Instagram and then meeting me at a networking event, would you feel like you'd ping-ponged to 3 different people? And that for me was a really great lesson to go, okay, let's rethink this. I want that interaction, no matter where you interact with me, to feel seamless and on brand. Because the minute that something feels like a disconnect, unfortunately, we subconsciously develop a level of mistrust with that brand. And I think that when we all get so great at what we do and our business is word of mouth and all of those things, we forget that we need to upgrade all those other touch points around us to stay pace with who we are as a human. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think that consistency, again, I'm sure lots of people have experienced that. And you hear often people talk about this in like celebrity way, where they have this understanding of who the person is. And we see this even in our own networks, online and offline, where you follow the person, you have an interaction with them. And then when you meet them, one or two things happens. It's like you're very familiar. You feel like you know them already because you follow them on social media. You listen to a podcast with them. Maybe you've heard them speak before, so you feel like you know them. Or the opposite happens where you go, oh, this is like a totally different person to what I've experienced in those 11 different interactions.
Yeah.
It's a great point around the consistency in our messaging, regardless of how that messaging is delivered.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same way you just said, you either have the interaction where the person feels familiar in what you expect. That's because they've built up, or you have built up, consistent 7-11-4 with that person. And if you're building that up but it's inconsistent, then it doesn't have the same impact.
And it's a great point you made around the mistrust, because if the latter option happens where you do feel that disconnect, especially if you're then looking to engage that person in your business, then there's almost that bit of like, well, which person am I getting? Am I getting the LinkedIn version, or am I getting the coffee catch up person? And that, yeah, especially for VAs and OBMs, where we're so ingrained in our clients' business, they trust us with an incredible amount of information and often an incredible amount of responsibility. That trust is so important. And if they're feeling like, I'm actually not sure who is the real person, that's going to be really difficult to convince them. Otherwise, it's that first impressions thing, right?
Absolutely.
Very interesting. We talked a little bit at the top around saying yes to everyone. How, and it'd be interesting to hear your experience of how you have managed when those not ideal clients are coming to you, and how you navigate having those conversations when potentially one part of you has got, you know, that financial brain going, I need to say yes to all these clients, especially when we're in those early years or we're in that point of growth, but you know they're not your ideal client.
Yeah. I think there's two parts to this answer. And one part is what you say to that potential inquiring client, and the other part is how you speak to yourself. So if we start with how you speak to yourself, a coach once said to me when I was deliberating getting rid of a particular program I was offering, and I said, oh, but it brings in X amount of money to my business, and that just feels like a lot to let go of, but also I'm not enjoying facilitating that offering anymore. Oh, but it's good money. I can't turn that down. You know, that same cycle that we go around in. And she said, based on how you've restructured and repositioned your business, how many clients would you need to book to replace that offering? And I went, 4. She's like, right. And why are you questioning it? And I went, oh, that's a really good point. Like, if I want to do more of the work that I love, I only needed 4 clients that I love to work with to replace that program that I was tearing my hair out facilitating. And that to me was kind of this line in the sand where I went, okay, if this isn't the right client, firstly, another one's coming, but also if this is a client who's used to my old pricing or my old structure, their expectations are not going to be in alignment with what I now do. How much more time am I going to spend and money am I going to lose trying to bring them into alignment? So I think the first thing is being true to yourself, knowing that I know this isn't a right fit anymore and I'm going to stick to my guns on that. I think that's the first mindset piece. The second piece, in terms of how you communicate with your clients, a lot of the time we have what I call those legacy clients, and we have a lot of care for them because often they were some of our first clients in our business, right? And we feel like we need to continue to serve them. But the truth is we don't need to serve people forever, and it's okay if we outgrow a client or they outgrow us. That's okay. Give yourself permission to be okay with that. In terms of what do you say to them, I have just honestly had a conversation with those clients saying, I have really loved working with you due to whatever reasons, if you want to give a reason, but I'm restructuring my services for the coming, you know, whether it's a financial year or calendar year, whatever it might be. You can put a date line in the sand to give yourself a phase out period and say, from this date, I will have new package offerings. And unfortunately, for so many years, I've been happy to honor our previous rates, but I just can't do that anymore. So here's my new offerings. and don't discount it for them. Whatever you would be offering to a new client now is what you offer to this client, because they've probably been on a much lesser rate at this stage for quite some time now. And what you will find is most of the time they will self-select out because that's just not the right fit for their needs. And what I found was, because I had repackaged the way I was doing my offerings, it was quite an obvious choice for them to say, oh, I love you, but that's not for me anymore. And I'd say, I know, and I've found these other people who could be a great fit for you. So a coach said to me, think about it's like you're elevating them onto their next part of their business journey while you go on yours. You don't have to be on the same journey. So think of it that way.
So many things I want to touch on. I think what you mentioned there around permission to be okay with the fact that sometimes clients will outgrow us. Likewise, we will outgrow clients is really, really powerful, and something I think the sooner we learn, the better. I think that's extremely helpful, because businesses will evolve, ours included as VAs and OBMs, and some of the clients who were there from the start and who backed us and had faith in us when we were getting started. Yes, it's great to be loyal, but we don't owe them anything. And I think to that also, there is a lot of hidden costs in working with the wrong client. Now, not wrong client as in they're rude or they don't pay, but just that are no longer aligned. I think there is so many hidden costs. Not only are they potentially not at the same packages or rates that you would offer to someone if they knocked on your door tomorrow, but you see their name pop up, you see their name in your inbox on your phone. There's a certain feeling that goes along with that. You might sit at the end of the day and debrief and rant and rave to someone in your home or in your community about them, and all those more emotional and health related stresses that come with working with the wrong client. We often talk about, they're not the right client because they won't pay me this, but you might have a client who will pay you an older rate perhaps, but you feel amazing when you work for them. They're so grateful for your work. They truly value what you do. They're complimentary, whatever those sorts of things that really light you up. I think there's often a lot of hidden costs, and that can come from premium clients that pay the highest rate as well. Yeah, I just think it's so important to acknowledge that working with the wrong people, there are so many hidden negative costs associated with that we don't often think about.
Wholeheartedly agree. And when I talk about upgrading our clients, I'm not always talking about upgrading how much they spend with us. Sometimes it can be their expectations of us, how they treat us, how we partner with them. It's about so much more than the dollar figure. And I couldn't agree more, because the expression more money, more problems that you often hear, that I don't find that that's always true, but it can be true. And you need to know that when you're working so closely with a client, as you are, you need to enjoy working with them, because no amount of money makes it worthwhile otherwise.
No, especially not for some of those really red flag types of behaviors. Do you have any examples, and maybe potentially from your own business, around where a shift in language and positioning really, there was a significant outcome or change after that shift in language and messaging?
Yeah, I think the best example I can give is actually for myself, which is ironic because messaging in words is what I do, but I had to get my own right in order to have the impact I wanted to have. So for the longest time, I talked a lot about, I had marketing in a lot of my language. So I said that I'd help you get your marketing sorted. And I felt like that worked for quite some time. But then over the years, I started to realize that using the term marketing was not really what I did. I wasn't managing people's social media. I wasn't writing their captions for Instagram. I wasn't running a Pinterest account for them. I wasn't doing that role. And I also didn't enjoy writing marketing strategies. That was not my expertise. My expertise was in finding the language that they needed and helping them understand what does their brand stand for and how do you communicate that in your marketing. So almost giving them the guidelines and here's the themes you talk about and here's the language you use, but not writing the day-to-day Instagram captions. So what I realized was when I kept talking about marketing, there was very much this perception that I was more of a doer versus a strategist. And not that there's anything wrong with either of those roles. It's just that I'm not good at the doing. Like, it's just not my superpower. And there's a reason that people are experts in that, because that is their superpower. So me talking about marketing was doing me such a huge disservice because it wasn't allowing me to talk about the messaging strategy work that I did, which actually is where I could bring tremendous value. Because a client would come to me saying, I need a new website. And when I would ask them some general questions around what their brand stands for and how they communicate about their services, they didn't have that language. And what I found was when I could do a messaging strategy for them, which was me interviewing them for about 90 minutes and extracting all of the juicy information that's in their head, but they don't know how to get into words on paper, I would then write that for them. And then all of a sudden, the website would just fall into place because we'd got all the information out of their head. And that's not marketing. That has very little to do with marketing. But no one knew that that was the skill set that I could do because I kept having all this language on my website saying that I'll help you get your marketing sorted. Yes, getting clear on your message will make your marketing easier, but I was missing the most high value part of the process. So when I got clear on my own language and when I changed my own website to stop saying I'll help you get your marketing sorted, I now say I'll give you messaging that reflects the true value of your expertise. And all of a sudden, people now understand that, oh, you help me with the words that I need, not the doing of the marketing. So that took me far too long to figure out. I can figure that out for a client in 90 minutes. It's much harder to do it of yourself. But what I found was when I got the language right to actually talk about what I do, which is ironically what I do for my clients, when I got that right, everything else fell into place.
And Tahnée, did you notice a difference in the types of client leads and inquiries that you got when you shifted that messaging?
Massively. Yeah, because my intensive service that I now offer obviously has a high price point because it's a week just working directly with me. And previously I had an offering that was just work with me for 2 hours here and there. But when I started talking about offering a messaging strategy and I demonstrated all of the other elements of your business that your messaging strategy could be implemented into, your pitch decks, your websites, your proposals, your marketing, your social media, all of these things, all of a sudden people went, oh, wow, you can do all of that in one go? I went, yeah, I can. But it wasn't until I could show the foundational piece that impacted all those other areas that people went, oh, wow, yeah, I need all those boxes ticked. I was talking in a way that let them tick one box at a time, the marketing box. When I started talking about how I can do one exercise, so to speak, that can tick off 5 boxes on the to-do list, firstly, I was getting clients that had the more established businesses who had the complete overwhelm of the to-do list they were never going to get through. Their business had evolved, but they didn't have time to update their messaging to reflect it. So they had this long laundry list of things that needed upgrading and no capacity to do it. And when they saw that I could do that in one engagement, then sign me up. So yes, I all of a sudden went from the people wanting the 1 or 2 hours with me to the week with me. And that was all because I started talking about what I do with different language.
Yeah. If someone's listening and they're thinking, yeah, you know what, the inquiries that I'm getting, they're not my ideal client. They're not the right type of client. Are there some small action steps that you would recommend that they could start chipping away at now if they're listening or watching and thinking, yeah, you know what, I think this is part of the issue is my messaging?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say is ask yourself, am I still trying to persuade people? What I mean by that is if you're using all of your marketing language about trying to convince people of the value of what you do, that to me is the first kind of red flag. Because if you're trying to convince people of the value of what you do, then what that means is you're trying to say to them, let me prove to you that I'm worth you working with me, right? We kind of need to flip that script a bit. Stop trying to prove yourself. Don't talk about what you do. Talk about the value you bring. When we're trying to prove ourselves, we rattle off the laundry list of all the things we can do for you. But the truth is that people don't pay us for what they do. They pay us for the value we bring and the impact we make. So look at everywhere you're communicating in your business and just do it one thing at a time. The next LinkedIn post you write or the next Instagram post you write. Ask yourself a question. Am I trying to persuade people here by giving them the laundry list of what I do? Or is there a way I could instead talk about the transformation that I'll make? Can I make them read it and say, oh my goodness, yes, that's how I want to feel? They don't want to read a post telling them about all the things you can do because they're already overwhelmed by all those things. They don't have the capacity to read the fine print. They want is the to-do list overwhelming you? Let me take that off your hands. So those clients that what I would call the more valuable clients that you want to be doing the work with, they're not reading the fine print. They don't want the persuasion. They just want to know that you can handle it. So stop bogging them down in the detail and trying to prove something to them, and just start to use language that talks about the outcomes. So get out of the process and get into the outcomes. Does that help?
It makes total sense. And it is that real kind of solutions focused selling, right? And selling, that's kind of what we're doing if we're building our client base, is instead of saying, here are all my services, it's more like, what is the solution? What is the outcome? What is the transformation that is possible for your clients and that you've achieved with other clients?
Yeah, the easiest way to summarize it is I think about the difference between features and benefits. So when we talk about even when you go to buy a product online, features is when, or if we talk about in a service-based business, a feature might be you get 5 hours with me every week or 5 hours with me every month, and I can manage these particular platforms, and you're talking through what you do. They're the features. But what people are paying you for is the benefits. So what are the benefits? I will take your to-do list off your hands. I will manage all of your platforms, social platforms each month. I will coordinate your next event. Like, I'm obviously making this up. Don't give them the granulars. Give them the benefit of you doing those things. So we're all very good at talking about the features. It's talking about the benefits that most of us tend to struggle with, but that's the secret sauce.
I love it. If people want to watch you and your various random and strange microphone stands, which I personally love. I love when I see them pop up. I'm like, I think the best was you had like the microphone strapped to strands of spaghetti. I'm like, that was a request.
Content. I've started taking requests from the audience.
If people want to know more about what you do, find you online, where is the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you. They can find me at The Strategy Studio on LinkedIn or thestrategystudio.com, or just under my name, Tahnée Sanders, on LinkedIn.
Fab. And we will pop all of that in the show notes and also include those book recommendations. I think you said Daniel Priestley. Is that oversubscribed?
Yes.
We'll make sure we include those because that framework sounds really interesting and super easy to follow. So thank you so much for coming on the Seed to Success podcast. I appreciate you and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Seed to Success. Make sure you are subscribing so you never miss an episode. If you know a VA or OBM who might benefit from this conversation, be sure to share it with them. And a big thank you to our episode sponsor, Ready to Boss Legal. Check out the episode description for a special discount on all their legal templates. Let's chat again soon.